guys. Welcome to the Insurance Gurus podcast. This is Stephen Martinez, the Medicare professor, alongside Justin Brock, the Medicare guru. And today we have a special guest for you. His name is Steve Chavez Lodge, and he is a longtime homicide detective in California. But most notably, he ran for governor of California in the recall election several years ago. But now he's in the industry. And so we've got him on our podcast here today. And we hope that he's going to share some good knowledge for you. And we might get a little political with this, but I think that kind of bleeds into the insurance industry. So
yeah, obviously, Steve, we're in the financial services industry. But we think we started doing a lot of business in California, and so I wanted to have you on just to talk about what goes on in California impacts the rest of the world or rest of our country as well for us. As well as many other industries and everything, really. So just tell me, a little bit, why did you decide to even get involved, politically in California?
Well, I'd always been involved politically behind the scenes, because when I was a homicide detective, I was also on the political action committee of our police association. So I was on there for many years on the board of directors, and we would endorse, particular candidates local that were running locally in the city and in the county, depending on who was running and who was running where. We would endorse them. Contribute to their campaigns and stuff like that. When I got out, I worked for, when I retired, I worked for a construction management firm, local company here, and I was their liaison to government. So very involved in that, and would go to all the campaign fundraisers and all that kind of stuff to meet the candidates and decide who we were going to endorse and who we were going to contribute to, depending on what their views were and how friendly they were to business. And then I decided to run in the recall election because I didn't see a candidate that had the background knowledge and experience that I had within not only government but also the private industry to try to help move them in the right direction.
So if only experience and proper background was, a top consideration for who runs the great state of California.
You got a guy that basically he doesn't even engage in the management of this state. I don't know what he's doing. Publicly, he hasn't been around ever since he got the last booster or whatever it was. He disappeared.
Yeah, well, he's probably in the basement that Joe was hiding out in for a while.
Well, I know he went to Mexico. I don't know if he ever came back.
They're in there together. So well, to pivot a little bit, California has, we're in the financial services side, and as far as you get into Medicare, DOI regulation there is so strict that we can't get certain products approved. And they'll make rules that make an insurance carrier have to do something that seems good and there's several states like this. New York's pretty bad too, but California makes these rules like, okay, well, we're going to make this rule to help seniors, so X product is guaranteed issue. What ends up happening is the price for all of that goes up 100% for everybody. And so what might have affected a really small portion of the population now negatively impacts the entire portion. Also makes it more difficult for agents to help them too. So, and you've seen this in other industries. You talked about trying to, I think sometimes when people look at like the concept of lobbying for a specific group, and I'm to some degree against lobbying, but at the same time, sometimes what's good for several private industries, police unions, all these things is also good for the entire state as a whole or the entire country as a whole. And so I guess you've spent a lot of time lobbying for these interests. When you were doing that, I think you said in the construction sphere, did you see California at all being open to the conversation of actually helping people in private industry quests, or was it just all what's popular, from the electorate?
Most of it is a lot of special interest. The elected officials only react to campaign donors that are going to help them continue to stay in office. They make decisions based on contributions, and that's not helping the public. You see time and time again, government officials, elected officials, making policy decisions that they haven't looked far enough ahead to see what kind of debacle they're going to cause later on, 10 or 20 years down the road. They make decisions based on how much they're going to get from a particular lobbying group. And it's disgusting because it doesn't help anybody. It only hurts. And the more regulations that we have, the higher the prices go up. That is absolutely connected. But getting these people out of office is once they're in office, an incumbent is very difficult to beat because he's basically got the bank behind him.
Yeah, the bank, the name recognition, the popularity and it almost seems like there's no correlation between the popularity of somebody in office when they do their polls. We don't call them popularity polls, but when their approval ratings can be tiny or really low. I mean, as in Newsom's or pretty much any president we've had or or Congress as a whole, but we keep electing the people that apparently we're simultaneously saying we don't approve of. So at some point, I guess we have to look at ourselves and be like, each individual is kind of the problem. Really do your research when you're voting, because don't just vote for somebody because you're like, yeah, I recognize that name. Or when, and I will say, actually, I would probably vote for him, but like Dr. Oz is running in Pennsylvania now, I think, for Senate. And, somebody like that with that name recognition, like in California, I guess it took an Arnold Schwarzenegger to get a Republican back in there as a governor because he had the name recognition and the money.
Yeah, well, that's it. Name recognition is huge, and the money that they can bring. I mean, and that's why you have these celebrities that are trying to get in because they do have the name recognition and they have the money. But for an average Joe, and during the gubernatorial recall election, there was like 33 candidates running, and I met probably 5 or 6 of them that were really sharp individuals and knew their public policy and knew how to straighten this mess out. But they didn't get any traction because they didn't have any money and they had no name recognition. The media is part of this problem because what the mainstream media does is they only allow candidates who can basically pay for commercials on their networks, and they'll give them the free, they'll be on a show like a news show or something and be able to get them that visibility only because the network knows they're going to get paid back with commercial money. If they don't see you raising money, they just walk away from you.
Yeah. And then what they talk about even offline is what polls like right now. They still, and this, I won't get into the Trump thing, can be really divisive, but the concept that when you turn on CNN or MSNBC, they're still talking about Trump all day. It's because they think that's what drives ratings and makes them money. Yeah. He's almost insignificant technically to what's going on right now, but they still talk about it because it's all about people selling a message.
Yep. People will watch.
Yeah. So with the, we've had like a lot of Department of Labor rules that are coming out in fiduciary capacity, and some of the stuff, it's like they're trying to help the beneficiary by eliminating bad actors in an industry, and I think a lot of industries are like this. So the regulation concept is that they want to make it more illegal to do certain things by creating more regulation and burden on everyone. And the bad actors are actually a really small percentage. And so I can't remember where I was. I think I was in the military at the time when somebody said one person shits their pants and everybody has to wear a diaper. Do you think that's a good analogy for how regulation works in America?
Yeah, I mean that's pretty good. I like that that analogy, and it's very what you'll see is these regulations, and the elected officials, they want their constituencies to be dependent upon government, because then that makes them dependent on them. So they push all the regulations towards more government control and more government intervention. You see it in almost every industry that used to be very private. The financial industry, the insurance industry, the medical industry, and government sees dollars, and they go after those industries to make them more dependent on government.
Yeah. One thing I thought was very interesting that you said was the more restrictions, the more the lobbyists have to pay. And so I think these politicians are more than okay with restrictions, even, not considering the effects and the consequences of them, because they know that in turn, they're going to probably get more money from the lobbyists for that. So I thought that was pretty telling.
Yeah. The more restrictive and the more fingers in the hands in the cookie jar they have at the government level, the more they have to pay to pry them out of there.
Yeah. And you'll see with elected officials, they start out at the local level and they try to work their way up. They just go from one elected position to the next. And that's not what our founders did not see that type of career politician just basically sitting in a position for 40, 45 years and living off taxpayers' money.
It's like they saw it at the presidential level. They saw, oh, okay, they're going to do, so we're going to put term limits on that. But every other office, and I'm like, some of the most powerful offices in the world now have 0 term limits associated with them. So you become the, by seniority in the Senate, pretty much unanimously seems to control, the Senate majority leader and the minority leader. And then you have the same thing with the whip. I mean, it's always based on like seniority, and basically that means, okay, you've held that seat for the longest amount of time. Some of those people you've never even heard of because they've never done anything super significant except stay in office for a long time.
Exactly.
And then all of a sudden they're the third most powerful person in the country, maybe even second. If you look at president, VP, and whip, they just nobody elected them to that office. They got elected to some random state, some random office, and then they just held it for 30 years. And now they're third most powerful person in the country.
Exactly. It's the craziest thing ever. And it's only getting worse because what it does is, because that system is set up like that, good people, really good people, are not able to get into elected positions.
Yeah. Well, we hope that, like microcosms like we have of attention over time can hopefully begin to collaborate and create a popularity network that isn't directly tied to having hundreds of millions of dollars in funds or being loved and adored by CNN or Fox News. I mean, it really should be the same way on either side. It should not be based on, being popular amongst media and having a lot of money. And we see it evolving now with, with like the Daily Caller and Turning Point USA and all these, even Young Turks. If you look at the smaller political groups, I'm hoping, 20 years from now, 15 years from now, because I think it's going to take that much time, where, mainstream media isn't a thing. There's just all these tiny, or not tiny, but smaller outlets that people can independently subscribe to. And it'll still be some division, but who knows, money may corrupt them as well in the long run,
Well, one of the problems you have is even if you get that later on, you get that kind of influence. The problem is the elected officials who are currently in office use that office to basically buy their constituents by giving them government freebies and promise things. And that's the power that they have. They not only have all this cash in the campaign and their campaign treasury, but they have the government backing them to give those freebies to their constituents. So they'll continue to vote for them.
Yeah. They'll just use our money or taxpayer money to
Right.
give away things to people. And that's why I don't really have a problem with the concept of taxes if it was properly utilized. But, when I have to write a gigantic check, like the one I just had to write at the beginning of October to settle up for 2020,
Right.
and I look at some of the just crazy thing like two tones down the side of a highway in the rivets. I remember in the government bailouts when the government bailouts in 08 and 09, they had some exposés on all the things that were hidden, like earmarks in those bills. And one of them was, I think it was in California somewhere, that they had spent several $1,000,000 creating, the rivets that are supposed to wake you up if you're coming off the road. Like, they go, brrr. They had made them a song. So it was like, dum, 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 dum. But the spacing in that, and that became part of the bailout money.
How much research had to go into when do we need these spaces? If the speed limit's 70 miles an hour.
I can almost guarantee you that no member of Congress ever actually reads the bills that they're voting on. They don't read them. They just get a summary.
They get bills that are this tall, worth of pages,
800 pages, and hey, we're voting on it in 30 minutes.
Right. Does that make any sense to just about anybody? Would you do that as a fiduciary? Just sign something that you've never read?
Right. Yeah. Here's ma'am, we're going to have a meeting about your financial portfolio. I need you to read this. We'll be signing it in 30 minutes.
And plus, they are leveraging our grandchildren's financial future.
Yeah, definitely.
Because they're basically spending money our grandchildren haven't even earned yet.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's crazy. Well, Steve, we appreciate you being here. If people wanted to reach out to you, I know you're active on Instagram. Is there any other way that people should reach out to you and get involved?
Either on Facebook or Instagram at Steve Lodge, lowercase OC. And if they DM me for whatever reason, I usually will respond and chat back at them.
Perfect, man. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed it.
Appreciate
you being out there, and hopefully people can follow someone who actually understands what's going on in those communities.
Absolutely. Appreciate the insight.
So great meeting you guys, and take care. Merry Christmas.
Thanks, buddy. Merry Christmas.